Eco-urbanism means that I want our human developments to be as compact as possible so that we can spare lots of room for nature. But the dominant form of development in Atlanta is car-centric sprawl, and sort of low-density sprawl. And look at that footprint, that is enormous. The ecosystems of the Georgia Piedmont, where Atlanta sits, have suffered from urban sprawl because nature needs space and it needs connectivity. So it's a problem when cities are spread out in a zigzag form like a net on top of nature. Imagine the thick cords of that net as being our roads and buildings and stuff, and only little disconnected pockets of nature are able to poke through. So we're fragmenting nature, which hurts biodiversity. Is this sprawl inevitable? There are people who will say that because Atlanta doesn't have any natural barriers like a coastline or a mountain range right next to us, that it is inevitable. This is Boulder, Colorado. It has a physical barrier that prevents urban sprawl from happening in every direction. We don't have a mountain range or a coastline to contain the Atlanta explosion, right? Which makes us a little bit more like a place like Austin, Texas. But even though Austin lacks a coast or a mountain range, it doesn't have sprawl like Atlanta does, and that's largely because of planning. They have been focusing on preventing sprawl there since the 1990s. And so I don't accept the natural barrier argument for why Atlanta is sprawling. We don't need mountains or a coast. We can use respect for nature and good planning to guide new development in a more sustainable direction. Thank you. Oh, that's Sweetwater Creek. Oh my God, how awesome is Sweetwater Creek? It's a great, that's the Piedmont. That's what we built subdivisions over. If there's a single phrase that sums up eco-urbanism, it's if you love nature, don't live near it. Spare room for wild nature, but of course we need greenery and trees and stuff within our cities just to make them livable, but that's not wild nature. That's not a healthy ecosystem. So why do I stay in Atlanta? Why do I not move to New York or Boulder or Austin or something? There are two reasons I stay here. It's constantly changing, and I'm constantly inspired by the good things that are happening. Now, change is messy. There's good and bad change, but the key takeaway is that the region isn't static. It doesn't stay the same. The rise of poverty in the suburbs is a very challenging kind of change that's happened in recent years. People who can't afford a car are now living in car-centric places. From 2000 to 2011, poverty rose in the Atlanta suburbs by 159%, much greater rate than it rose in the city. Population growth is a messy kind of change. The Atlanta region is expected to have 8 million people in 2040, up from current 5.5 million. This change is inevitable in a growing world that is increasingly moving to urban areas. In addition to change, there's inspiration. A lot of people in Atlanta want it to be a place that's easier to walk and bike in, and increasingly, they understand that the built environment is key to facilitating those kinds of things. A promising statistic for the form of the region is that 50% of new properties developed in the Atlanta region from 2009 to 2014 happened in walkable urban places. Places near MARTA stations or near the B-word, the Beltline, like Glenwood Park here. Glenwood Park is just like, that's human scale kind of development that can appeal to a wide range of people. We've got infill development happening all over. Infill is where you get offices and stores built within the existing footprint rather than on the fringes. We've got with walkable development, you get transportation benefits. I lost past that. Transportation benefits where you get like people biking and walking, and MARTA use is up. And we've got infill happening, offices and stores getting built within the existing urban footprint rather than on the fringes. Instead of abandoning old properties and building new stuff on the fringes, we're reusing those properties. And there's a big caveat to sort of winning. I mean, we are winning. With all the demographic changes, in all the inspired ideas in Atlanta. I'll say, just with cautiously, that we're winning in a limited way when it comes to growing in a better form. And the big caveat to that is that there's no plan in most places in the region to prevent new sprawl from happening, to prevent dead subdivisions that were not fully developed from picking up again. And this is happening, and mansions are still being built. And another big caveat is that if you asked anyone without a car living in the existing sprawl of Atlanta if they feel like we're winning, and they'll probably say no. Retrofitting our sprawl in Atlanta for walkability is something that we need to address. So can we get wide-scale buy-in on a better built environment? Or do we just need to accept the headlines that tell us that Atlanta is the sprawl king and let that be our identity? Should sprawl be the identity for Atlanta? I say no. I say reject that identity. And it's important to do so because sprawl is a social justice issue, and it's an environmental justice issue. This, and I'm going to go for it here, this is our New Orleans flood. This is our Detroit economic collapse. Just like New Orleans remade itself in its identity as a city that overcame a flood, just like Detroit will be a city that overcame economic collapse, we can identify ourselves as the place that overcame sprawl and all of its damages. This is the generation that can do it. Let's embrace the issue for the sake of having a healthier environment and a healthier society.